Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Robert Ficara. My family is my dad over here and my mom over here. We have owned the bowling lanes and Shooters Pub for 29 years now. We have a great staff behind the bar that we are very grateful to. We are also very grateful to the staff that has been helping us get this together today, and we'd like to thank them. But I'd like to thank all of you for coming today, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Governor Christie. Thank you.
All right. Now, I've done 135 town hall meetings in New Jersey. I've never done one in a pub on a Friday night when everybody's ready to have a good time. Now, the press that covers me in New Jersey and who traveled here to New Hampshire today are now asking me if I will start to have my town hall meetings in pubs on Fridays. So you all may be starting a trend for me. I am sorry to have my back to anybody. But thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. It was great to be able to pick some of the tickets. The person who won $151, you owe me big time. And I want to talk to you just off the top about a few things that I think are concern for our country. But I'm going to speak briefly, and then I want to take the rest of the time for you to ask me questions about whatever is on your mind. I did a town hall meeting in Londonderry on Wednesday, and had a really great time. Had a lot of people show up. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting. A lot of really good questions. You're getting cheated a little bit because on Wednesday I had my wife Mary Pat with me. She's back in New Jersey tonight. I was getting the updates till I walked in here on our son's baseball game. So she's watching Patrick's baseball game. When I walked in, they were up 10-5 in the 6th inning. So that's good. We'll see if it lasts when I get back out there. 14-year-old baseball, as you know, can be variable. Mary Pat sends her best. We had a great time there on Wednesday. And then I went back to New Jersey yesterday, did a town hall meeting in front of 400 people in Bergen County, Hasbrook Heights. That was my 135th town hall since I've been governor of New Jersey. And now I'm back here for my second New Hampshire town hall meeting. I'll tell you just a little bit about myself, because for a lot of you, you may know me a little bit. You may not know me at all. You may know just what you've heard on the news. Please, take this moment to forget all of that, okay? I was born in New Jersey. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. My mom and dad were both born in New Jersey. Now, I grew up in a household with an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. I think there are probably people in this room who can... You can relate to what that means. What that means is at a very young age, I'm the oldest, at a very young age, I became expert in dispute resolution. It was not that my mother was argumentative. It was just that she never found an argument that wasn't worth having. And she and my dad had a very spirited relationship. And what they encouraged all of us in that house to do was to do the same thing they did. My mother used to say to me all the time, whenever she was complaining about what she was complaining about, and I'd say, do I have to listen to this? My mother would say to me, absolutely, I need to get this off my chest now. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're hearing it right now. So I grew up in a household where we were not only encouraged, but really required to speak our mind. There was no suffering in silence, and if you later on complained, my mother would say to you, well, that's your fault. You should have let me know what your problem was when you were having it. And she never was somebody who held back when she had a problem with you or when she wanted to tell you what direction she thought you should go in. And so I've entered public life in New Jersey as a guy who does exactly the same thing. You're not always going to like everything that I say, but you will have no doubt who I am and what I think and how I feel. And in New Jersey, that's gone fairly well. Now, in my town hall meetings, which some of you may have seen little pieces of on the news every once in a while or excerpts on YouTube, if you go on there, you may have seen some of my more spirited interactions with some of my people. That's the way we like to interact with each other. People have complaints or concerns, they bring them to me, and I try to answer them back. And if I disagree with them, I tell them I disagree. And as long as they're nice to me, I'm nice to them. Sometimes they're not as nice to me. And then we have to take matters into our own hands. But the fact is that we never worry about what each other is thinking, and that's the way I felt connected as governor for the last 5.5 years. And unfortunately, in our country, we haven't had that same thing. I feel like we really have a president for the last 6.5 years that we still don't even know. We don't know what he really believes in. We don't know what he really is willing to fight for. We don't know whether he's really willing to fight for anything. We don't know who he really likes or dislikes. We don't know whether he really cares about his own party or the other party or about the country. What we know is that he cares about two things right now with less than 2 years left in his presidency. They're the two L's. Two L's of what Barack Obama cares about: legacy and library. That's what he cares about right now. He's trying to build a legacy and build a library. Those would be the two things that are left. And so he's doing some things that, quite frankly, I think are crazy. Negotiating the type of agreement that he's negotiating with Iran right now, that, in my mind, is going to guarantee us that we're going to have a nuclear-weaponed Iran, is going to lead to nuclear weapons all throughout the Middle East and lead to a much more dangerous, much more difficult world for us and for our children and our grandchildren. And he spends his time doing this and asks for nothing in return. Now he's going to talk with the Cubans. And while they are harboring terrorists in their country, including one that murdered a New Jersey state trooper 40 years ago, who the Castro regime has been harboring there, paying for her, allowing her to speak publicly, this president's considering taking them off the terrorist watch list. And Joanne Chesimard, the woman who committed the murder and then broke out of prison in New Jersey and escaped to Cuba, she's on the FBI's top 10 domestic terrorist watch list. Well, if she's there in Cuba and they're keeping her there and protecting her, how can we take them off the terrorist watch list if they're protecting terrorists? And I know this, that widow of that state trooper who still lives in our state, and that trooper's children, they've been missing their father now for over 40 years. And she deserves to be brought back to prison to serve her time in New Jersey for the crime that she committed and was convicted of by a jury of her peers. Yet, this president doesn't care about that because he wants as part of his legacy. Say he's the president who opened back up to Cuba. It's the same kind of thing about not wanting to tell hard truths to people. You know, our federal budget, and I talked about this at St. Anselm's earlier this week, 71% of our spending at the federal level is on entitlements. 71%. Everything else the government does, everything else the federal government does is only 29% of what they spend every year. So if you're going to talk about national issues, you better start by talking about entitlements. Because if we don't talk about that, we're not going to have any money to pay for any of the other stuff. So you'll have people who are thinking about running for president who will come before you and talk about national defense. It's very important. Talk about education and our children's future. Very important. Research and development. National Institutes of Health. Finding new cures for diseases. Partnering with businesses. Cutting taxes. Doing all things that we need to do to grow our economy and make our lives better. But if they don't deal with that first part, we won't get anywhere. Now, people don't like to talk about that because by definition, you're changing a system that people have come to depend upon. And we need to give people time to change that system. And I put forward a proposal that gives them time to do that. We don't raise the Social Security retirement age until 2040, 25 years from now. Should give everybody plenty of time. Gosh, 25 years from now, I'll be 77 years old. All right, so I'll be well past the retirement age. I mean, we got a lot of time to do it if we act. But if we don't, we're going to bankrupt the next generation. We'll survive, but do we really want to be part of the first generation in American history who left this country poorer and weaker for the next generation than was left to us? That's been the deal we've made with each other. Over the course of 230 plus years in this country, we've made a deal that we're going to do everything we need to do, whether it's to fight wars, work hard at home, make sacrifices, aspire to great things, go to the moon. Everything that we needed to do to be able to make this country better and greater, we will do, because we want the next generation to have the chance to make it even better and even greater than it was before. All right, that's what we want. And the fact is, if we don't deal with the problems up front and honestly, we're not going to have the chance to do that. Now, you know, there'll be a lot of people who will come before you and not want to be specific about it. They'll say things like, we should do something about Social Security and I'll get back to you on that. Or I heard someone say the other day, well, before we do anything to Social Security, we should cut government waste. Listen, I don't think, maybe show of hands, anybody here in favor of government waste? Right? Anybody going to go in there? They have a lobby that's fighting to protect government waste. Nobody wants government waste. But remember something. We're talking about 29% of the federal budget on everything other than entitlements. And then what percentage of that is waste? Even if you got rid of all of it. If you waved a magic wand and got rid of all of it, it would be a fraction of what we needed to move this country forward. So when those folks come and tell you that's the way they're going to fix the problem, do me a favor, boo them out of the room. Boo them out of the room. Say, listen, come back to us when you have real ideas and you're willing to take the risk that goes along with putting forward ideas that some people just may not like. I'll end with this. When I ran for governor of New Jersey in 2009, I was running in a state as a Republican that has not elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 42 years. It is the longest streak of any state in America not to elect a Republican to the U.S. Senate. We have 750,000 more Democrats than Republicans. And before I got elected in 2009, we hadn't elected a Republican statewide in 12 years. And when we ran in 2009, I told people this. I'm not running for governor to be elected prom king. I'm not looking to be the most popular guy in the room. I'm looking to be the most respected guy in the room. Because I'm going to tell you what you really need to hear. And some days you like it and some days you won't. And you know, some days I say things I probably shouldn't. I know you find that hard to believe. And every once in a while there'll be some things I've said publicly that I'd like to pull the words back as soon as they came out of their mouth. And I'm sure there's nobody else in this room that's ever had that experience. But I'd rather be that way than to be standing up here and calculating every word that's going to come out of my mouth, reading from some script, so you don't really know what's in here and what I believe. So here's the way we do this. I don't do these town hall meetings like other folks do, where they have you write down questions when you walk in, then you hand the questions to the staff, then the staff reads the questions and decides which ones I'd like to answer, hands me those, and then we say, that was a full, free, and fair exchange, wasn't it? Now, there are almost no people in this room that I know. And so all I want you to do is raise your hand and I'll call on you. Right here. He's last, that's for sure. That's trouble back there. All right. Well, Dan, then you're first. Do I really want it? Well, I'll tell you this. If I do it, you can assume that I want it. I don't do anything halfway in my life. Yep. I don't do anything halfway in my life. And so the answer is, if I run for president, I'm going to run full out and I'm going to run to win. Done. All right, we got a deal. That's good. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Question. Oh, this is my question.
Yep.
We have a lot of homeless, a lot of people in this country, and every day you turn on the TV and you hear that he's given 27 point whatever million more, 9 million to Africa, more millions of this. Okay, so when and if you get to take over the regime, what do you plan on doing about what we have right here in the United States, the homeless?
Yep.
I worry about it. The children and this. I work for the soup kitchens and the food pantries, and as a volunteer, I see it every day. And
Yep.
we need to correct what we have here.
You're right. Listen, one of the things that I talked about in the speech on Tuesday was that we now spend 56% of every worker's income on entitlement programs and 8% on children. 56% on entitlement programs, 8% on children. And over the last 25 years, the number of children in poverty in this country has risen to 20%. 20% of America's children live in poverty. It's unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable. But here's the thing. We have to make a decision as a people. Are we willing to care more about the potential of children than the comfort of adults? And we're going to have to make some tough choices. And those tough choices are some of the things that I laid out the other day about changing entitlement programs so you're spending less of that money on our adult population and more of that money on our kids and their potential. And it's not just helping homelessness, it's education and making tuition more affordable for kids who want to go to college. It's about making sure that they're not buried under with loans. That when they get out of college, they're paying 20 or 30 years, they're paying a mortgage before they ever own a home. Well, but that's my point. All of those different programs, all of them, are out of that 29% we talked about. And when you look at the percentage between what we spend on adults and what we spend on kids, 56% on adults, 8% on kids. It's wrong. And that's how we're going to have to change it. So the way I would look to do this is to say, let's make those changes here, and then let's make investments in our children. And that investment starts with them being able to be fed and clothed. Going to a school that's going to spend enough time, longer school day and a longer school year, to make sure that they're ready for their career or for college, whichever they choose. That's going to make our country better and stronger no matter what. A better populated, better educated, better fed young people will lead to a better life for our country in general. So, but that's why I'm talking about these things, because they're not abstract. It's a real choice that we got to make. And it's a hard choice, but it's not that hard. We know what we need to do, and we're not doing it. Of course not. And what I'm saying to you is you don't throw them away. The elderly who need it, Social Security was always supposed to be an insurance program against poverty for the elderly. We don't want any of our older Americans to be growing old in poverty. But how about this? If you make over $200,000 a year in retirement income, do you really need the Social Security check? You just don't. I mean, because if you have $200,000 in retirement income, that means you've got at least $4 million saved that's throwing off that money. Do you really need that monthly check? And if you're receiving Medicare and you're making $200,000 a year in retirement income, instead of subsidizing your Medicare premiums 75%, can we subsidize them 10%? Right? They can afford that. So this is about giving children opportunity and preserving the protection for the elderly poor, so they don't live in poverty, so they don't live out their later years in poverty, because this system will go bankrupt, or we will have to raise taxes to such a backbreaking level that the middle class in this country will be absolutely devastated. We should make those choices. Yes, ma'am.
As a small business owner, my paycheck doesn't come from anyone else but myself. And when it comes to insurance, whatever, I don't have anyone behind me, because that all comes from me. What are you going to do to help me sustain my 5 children, a family of 7, that I'm not guaranteed a paycheck from anyone else? Yep. And as a small business owner, there's not always someone there to back me.
Often there isn't.
No,
right?
There actually really isn't.
You have to open up your place every day. You have to market your place. You have to make sure you get the customers there. You have to provide a product and a service that they want, and that they're willing to pay for, and then you can make a profit in. And then you got to pay taxes.
My employees.
Of course.
And I have to pay their taxes and everything else.
Yep.
My employees come before my family. But with the health insurance thing, when Obamacare came in, I got dropped because I was a small business owner. And that was it. It was out. I was done. Yep. It was over.
When he told you that wasn't going to happen, right?
Right. He told me it wasn't going to happen, but it did happen.
If you like your insurance, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep going.
I couldn't keep it because in the state of New Hampshire, it was gone. So $900 a month with a $15 deductible then became my issue. I don't have a guaranteed paycheck. I can't guarantee to cover that. So what are you going to do to help small business owners and families that's what sustains their homes and their life?
The same thing that you do to help small business owners is the same thing you do to help working class families in the country. We have to get our economy growing faster. And part of the way to do that is we've got to get more money into this system. And it can't be from the government. You know, we have to simplify the tax system for both companies and for individuals. We have to go to lower rates and less loopholes and less special preferences and incentives, and have everybody pay a flat type of tax, which allows them to know this is what my bill's going to be every year.
Right.
And I know what it is. The fact is that we have trillions of dollars offshore that they won't bring back to shore because our tax system here is worse than almost any tax system in the world. And you have companies that are going through these corporate inversions where they're buying foreign companies in order to allow the American company to be headquartered in the foreign country to avoid our taxes. And what's the president's solution to that? To pass a law against corporate inversions. That's treating the symptom instead of the disease.
Right.
The disease is that these folks feel like they have a fiduciary duty to shareholders not to pay these ridiculous taxes that they can pay less elsewhere. So the way to do this, whether you're a small business like yours or whether you're a larger business or individual families and what you pay in your own personal taxes, is to flatten this system out, make it lower, get rid of so many of the loopholes. And some of the loopholes some people may like that you have to get rid of. But in the end, if you're paying a lower rate, you don't have a tax return that's this thick. I mean, no offense to all the accountants. My father's an accountant, but you know, we shouldn't all have to have big, thick tax returns just to comply with this tax code at the federal level and the state level. So those are the things that we need to do, because economic growth right now, as you know, is at 2 or 2.5%. It's the weakest recovery from a recession we've had in recent history. We need to get economic growth back up to 4.5%. That will help folks like you to be able to have more money in your pocket. And we need to get rid of Obamacare and go to a system
We do.
that lets the states work with you to decide how we provide health care.
Thank you.
Not coming from Washington. Right over here. Yes, sir.
Illegal immigration and welfare. I mean, they're tied together, in my mind, anyway. How do you get welfare people that used to have to work to get their welfare checks back to work, and illegal immigrants out of the country? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, first off, on illegal immigration, there's a couple of things that we need to know first. Our government, both parties, didn't secure our border. And after President Reagan tried to fix this problem in the mid-1980s, we wind up 30 years later or so back in a similar position as we were then. And so we need to make sure first that we secure the border. Now, I'm not a wall guy. I mean, there will be certain places where a wall or a fence may work, but not the entire border. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense, and it sends the wrong message, quite frankly. As you know, there's not a wall or a fence that someone can't get over or under or through, right? We need to be smarter about the way we use technology to be able to protect the border and manpower. But in the end, remember something. The folks who come here illegally, they're coming to work. That's why they're coming. And so if we get a system that we then believe is going to be fair, then we have to crack down on employers. We have to say to employers, hey, you employ someone who's not here in a documented status, you're going to get penalized, you're going to be in trouble. That's what will slow the flow. If people get the word that the only way you're going to get a job here is if you come here legally, and the flow will slow down significantly, I would say to you, better than any wall or any fence or anything else. Because I've never met, listen, my state is the most ethnically diverse state in the country. And I have met lots of undocumented immigrants in my state. And I will tell you, not one of them has ever said to me that they came to America because they wanted to vote. Right? No one's ever come to me and said, Governor, I came here to this country because I wanted to vote. They said, I came here because I want to work. Right? Second thing is, I'm not saying everybody, there's no universal yes to everything. You know? Well, but here's the thing. If we wait around for self-deportation, that's not going to happen. Right? So we've got to come up with a way of dealing with the folks who are here, their children who were born here, many of whom are now American citizens. And if they were born here, they are American citizens. And we don't have a system right now that even contemplates that. And we don't put any premium on what value someone who's trying to legally immigrate here can bring to our economy. Now, almost everybody who's here had ancestors who immigrated. Almost everybody. And so the fact is that we've all benefited from legal immigration. And what we have to do is get a system back where people believe, one, the government will actually secure the border. Two, that deals effectively with the people who are already here, because they're not going to leave on their own. And by the way, I was the U.S. attorney for 7 years in New Jersey. There are not enough law enforcement people in the entire country. If all they were doing every day was rounding people up to deport them, we don't have enough to do that. So we got to come up with a way that we're going to deal with folks fairly, deal with the people here who are trying to work that are American citizens in a fair way, and then let's deal with the welfare piece on the end of it. Well,
welfare is good for people who are poor and whatever, that need welfare. But what about all these people that take welfare that should be out working?
Listen, the American...
You didn't want to take welfare. If you did,
It was temporary, and it was temporary. The American people are the most compassionate and generous people in the world. And nobody in this country, or at least very few people, are going to want to say, listen, if you're poor and you can't find a job, we're going to let you starve in the street. We don't do that in this country. But, nor should we. But we do say, if you're an able-bodied person who can work and you're getting our help, we want you to work. And lots of states, including mine, have instituted those type of programs. And they've been fairly effective over time. Maine's now doing it as well.
They should be. With the infrastructure problems we have in this country, they should be able to find work for you.
We should, but here's the other problem. It goes back to the other problem I talked about before too, right? We want to be able to invest in infrastructure and do other things, but if all we're doing is writing checks to people, whether it's welfare or whether it's Medicare or whether it's Medicaid, or if that's all we're doing, we're not going to be able to do the other things that you're talking about. So these tough choices are the choices that we have to make, and if we don't make them, we're going to wind up having a situation like you're talking about where there's a lot of people who are getting paid for by a few. And this country won't survive that way. So it's a good point. All right. How about in the back? Right there.
Mr. Governor, thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
Originally from Hillside, New Jersey.
All right. So my father graduated high school.
And Stevens Tech.
Yes. Great engineering school.
Question for you. You talked about an economic legacy that we need to address, but I'm concerned about the environmental legacy and the issue of climate change. As a governor of a state that was devastated by Superstorm Sandy, what do you think we should do? What should the position be of the United States as a leader in the world and within our own borders to address climate change?
Well, listen, first thing is, as I said before, I believe climate change is real. Now, the question is, how do you address it? I don't believe the way you address it is the way the president proposed at the beginning with a cap and trade tax on people. Secondly, I don't believe we can do this on our own. We have to have cooperation with the rest of the world. If America changes its behavior and puts up with the economic ramifications that will happen from changing that behavior in the short term, the rest of the world has to engage in it with us. You know, we're not the only people on the globe. And so you look at what's happening in China right now. China's got to come on board to help worry about the environment and climate change and what's happening around the world as well. Russia has to do it. A number of the other countries have to make sure that they do that. So part of what a president would need to do is to lead an effort around the world to say, how are we going to address this issue? I will tell you that many times you'll hear from folks, and I've read from folks in the Chinese government say, well, you had your industrial revolution. We're just having ours. Get back to us after we're done with ours. Well, you know, that's not a sufficient answer, and we've got to sit down with other countries around the world to say, how do we address this issue in an effective way? I don't believe taxing it is going to change behavior. I just don't. In fact, what it'll do, it'll put us in an even worse economic position. This woman who was there before was saying, you know, about her own small business. Imagine if we start to have to put cap and trade and taxes on all these folks in addition to everything else in connection with energy, even greater taxes. The alternative is that we can move towards other types of cleaner, safer fuels. In New Jersey, for instance, we got out of the regional cap and trade arrangement, and we've already reached our goals for 2020 in terms of cleaner air. We're moving more towards natural gas, which is a much cleaner fossil fuel. 53% of New Jersey's electricity is generated by nuclear, which is not polluting. We are the third largest producer of producing state of solar energy in the country. There are alternatives. Natural gas is a cleaner fossil fuel. Nuclear is an option that should be pursued and utilized if you're worried about climate change. And we think solar energy is a way that's really helped us, especially our industrial base in our state. And so there are alternatives to it. I don't believe taxing it is the way to go. And you need to bring international cooperation. If we're just doing it on our own, we're disadvantaging ourselves economically, and we're not improving the global problem. So that's the way I would go about it. Yes, ma'am, right there. Here, you take it.
This is something I don't understand. Why are we borrowing money consistently from China, and yet we give some of this money to other countries to help their economies? Why aren't we taking care of our own? That's my question. I'd like to understand.
Well, I would disagree with you a bit. I think we do a lot to take care of our own. And we need to do more, as we talked about before. But remember something now. You know, the amount that we spend in foreign aid, which you referenced, is minuscule compared to what we spend in a lot of other areas. And so America does have certain responsibilities as a leader in the world. And I think we've seen when we pull back from that world leadership, which we've done over the last 6 years, what happens to the world. When we pull out and we leave a vacuum, bad people with bad intentions fill that vacuum. Vladimir Putin in Russia, the mullahs in Iran, the terrorists in Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they fill that vacuum. And so we have to play an assertive role in the world, in my opinion. The problem of why we're borrowing so much money from the Chinese and printing so much money at the Fed is because we're not willing to make hard choices on the things we're spending money on. I hate to be a broken record, but if you're spending 71% of that money, both taxed and borrowed, on entitlements, and only 29% on everything else, well, let's deal honestly with the entitlement issue. Then we have more money to invest in education, in research and development, to give people tax cuts, to do the things that we want to do to take care of our own, to build infrastructure. But I will tell you honestly, the easiest thing in the world for me would be for me to tell you, yeah, you know what? Let's end all foreign aid, and we'll use that money, and that'll solve our problem. It won't. It won't even come close to filling it. What we need to do is to start saying, what are our priorities? What are the things that are most important to us? And realize that we have a finite amount of money to do that. Well, then if you believe, well, I would say this, though. If we're spending 71% of our federal money on our people, just on entitlements, okay, that's just Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. If we're doing that, it is an entitlement, sir.
No, it is not.
It is.
Out of my paycheck, and I got to pay double on it. South was employed for 20 years. We paid for that.
You absolutely did. Now, here's the question. If Social Security is now spending twice what it takes in, if it's that, now listen, because people are living longer. Let's deal with the facts of this now. The average female now lives to 83 years old. The average man now lives to 79 years old. When these programs were created and devised, people didn't live past their mid-60s. We now have people living 15 to 20 years longer than these programs were designed to take care of. So we're now spending twice what we take in. That can't continue.
But Governor, you have all these people coming over going on disability.
Well, I talked about that too.
We just gave out 500,000 Social Security numbers to illegals that came over here, and probably half are going to go on disability.
Listen,
So
disability.
we're paying for that.
You absolutely are. And that's why I
I
took.
take care of myself the rest of, my whole life, so I live longer. But I paid into that thing ever
Right.
since I started.
Right, and let me
working.
tell you something.
It is not an entitlement.
No,
Don't-
sir,
I'm getting
sir.
it.
If you need Social Security, it will be there for you. If you need, obviously, but look at what I proposed. If you have $200,000 in income, retirement income, other than Social Security, I'm saying for the betterment of the country, you shouldn't take Social Security, even if you paid for it. There's lots of things you pay for that you don't get money back for. You buy homeowners insurance on your house in case your house burns down. At the end of it, when you sell your house, do you go back to the insurance company and say, hey, you know what, my house didn't burn down, I'd like 3/4 of the money back? I mean, you don't, because the security that went with it was if your house did burn down, you are going to be taken care of. If you make between $80,000 and $200,000 a year in retirement, you're still getting Social Security. And if you make less than $80,000 a year in retirement, you're still getting Social Security. So our argument is about, do we really need people who are making $200,000 a year or more in Social Security to be taking that check?
But then, Governor,
of course they paid into it. Of course they paid into it. Well, listen, and if you want, absolutely. Well, listen, again, you can argue about every other different kind of federal program that you'd like to eliminate, and what I will promise you is that it will do absolutely nothing to move the needle. And the fact is, we can continue to do it this way, continuing to spend twice what we take in. It will end at some point. The Chinese will stop lending us money. We'll stop printing at the Fed. And then what's going to happen to our country? Well, that's exactly right. Now, I'd love to be able to tell you that what you pay into Social Security is exactly that, plus you're going to get back out. And for most people in this country, that will happen. But not if we say to every person in this country, regardless of whether you need that supplement or not, regardless of whether you need that insurance or not, and I know you disagree with me, but I can't get in a...
Governor, I do agree with some of what you're saying. My point is, it's the same thing. We have to pay into this. It's forced out of our paycheck, and if you have your own business, you're paying double.
Right.
Right? They call it self-employment.
Yep.
Tax. So, okay, so I got to pay into it's an additional tax if I get nothing in return. Hell, look at all the money we're sending down to the Beltway. We're getting nothing.
Well,
I haven't heard one thing from you tonight about saying how we're going to cut spending. How about we start getting rid of things like, all these departments of commerce, agriculture,
sir,
all these,
how about
the IRS?
How about,
are they in Vegas partying right now?
How about we agree to this? How about if we eliminate every department in the federal government? Eliminate every. But wait a second. What if we eliminate every department in the federal government? Let me tell you what's going to happen. It's nothing. It is nothing comparatively speaking to what we're spending on these other things. Now, I understand that's an uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact. I'm not saying, listen, as governor, I cut 800 programs in my first year as governor to reduce spending. We have 8,500 fewer employees in New Jersey today in state government than the day I walked in. I am going to be more than willing, in leadership positions to make those cuts. But the honest part of what I'm telling you is that even after you do all that, in our state, the biggest problem we have is the public pension system.
Exactly. That's why I'm here, because I watched what you did in Jersey.
Right. And so
that's what's breaking California.
Right. So my point to you is that's the argument I'm having in New Jersey, even after we spend in all the spending in New Jersey outside of pensions, health benefits, and debt service, right? The three things we have to, we spend $2.5 billion less today than we did 8 years ago. In real dollars, right? So that's really reducing the size of government at the state level when you're talking about a $32 billion budget, right? So that's 8+% reduction in real spending, right? So now, but let me tell you something. It's not moving the needle because we're supposed to be making a $4.5 billion pension payment a year. A year.
And was it only half funded?
Hey, it's a little bit over, 55%.
Oh, that's bad.
Right? It's bad. And it's because for years before I got there, people did not make the pension payments. Right? So the point is, the similar situation is what we're doing on the federal level with those programs. And so unless we get them under control, and I know it's frustrating and it's angering, I get it.
Part of the governor is getting the government.
All right, this is the last one, then I got to go to somebody else.
Pardon me, but getting the government off our back.
Well, listen.
That's it.
I am all for getting the government off your back in many material ways. But the reason I led with this issue is because I want to lead with the one that moves the needle the most. I could lead with all the other stuff and make you feel really good, but I'll tell you something, at the end of it, it's not going to change the situation. Then you're going to say, you did all that and it didn't change the situation? What the hell were you doing? All right? So let's lead with the thing that really is going to move the needle the most. It doesn't mean you don't do the other stuff. We'll talk about all that other stuff as we move down the line, but I started with this because I really believe it's going to take a while, as is evidenced by this, to get the American people to understand why we have to do what we do. I like that. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Welcome to Exeter, New Hampshire.
I'm happy to be here.
With the high number of veterans suffering from PTS, what do you plan on doing to help them?
Well, one of the real disgraces that's happened in this administration has been the complete inept running of the Veterans Administration. Completely inept. And they were lied to. Veterans were lied to. Now, I'll tell you, one of the things that we've done in New Jersey is to establish a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline that's manned not only by mental health professionals, but by veterans, purely for mental health issues for returning vets. And so at any time of the day or night, every day of the week, they can pick up the phone. They want to talk to a mental health professional, they're there. Or if they're not quite ready for that and they want to just speak to a vet that they'll feel more comfortable with, a man or woman who's experienced the same things that they have, we have those people available too. What we need to do for veterans, in my view, is to supplement the veterans' hospitals. Private sector hospitals and nonprofits in this country want to help veterans. Every veteran should get a voucher to be able to go and get health care wherever that veteran wants to go and get it. They have put their life on the line for our country, sacrificed greatly, and many of them have been greatly injured, not only physically, but psychologically. They shouldn't have to wait months to get psychological treatment if they need it. They shouldn't have to wait months to get medical treatment if they need it. And we have the hospitals willing and available to do it. We're spending a ton of money on it. Let's move them beyond the veterans hospitals. They want to go to veterans hospitals, great. But if the veterans hospital is too long awake, then go to the hospital down the street who's willing to help you. That's the promise we made to veterans. We promised them medical care for the rest of their lives if they served our country loyally. And when they do, and we don't do that, that's a national disgrace. And you talk about taking care of your own, that's one of the ways that we can and should do that. And there's no reason that we shouldn't supplement the Veterans Administration doing it that way. And you have lots of hospitals, especially a lot of the nonprofits, who are willing to do it at a reduced cost because they want to be part of the solution to help veterans in this country. It's a finite group. We can help them, and we should. So those are my ideas of what we would do with that. Over here. Yes, sir. I got turned that way, right behind you.
I think you need a better answer on the climate change question. And,
okay.
Okay. The first thing you need to do, my opinion, is to put a price on CO2.
Yeah, I disagree with you.
Okay.
I mean, it's not that I need a better answer. You just want me to have your answer.
No. Could be both.
Right?
You still need a better answer.
Okay.
But you should listen to suggestions.
I'm happy to listen to you.
Fine. Let's do. Yeah. What you should do, rather than a tax or cap and trade, cap and trade is a terrible idea. It has two parts. There's the cap, the trade. The cap's the political problem, and it's difficult. Trade's easy. The carbon tax is a problem because you put the tax on it and you give it to the government to redistribute in some way, which is a problem too.
I agree.
I believe that you should use a waste disposal fee and use the waste disposal fee. And we know how to do those things because we do it at the town dump every day.
We do, sure.
And we do it at the utility. And you use the waste disposal fee rather than to give it back to the people in the form of a bribe. You basically use it to solve the problem. And that problem solving is a little bit challenged at the moment, but there are ideas. But I don't think we're using the vehicle correctly, but I do think you'll get there. Secondly, China will lead us in this issue. They're well beyond what you suggested you know. They're ahead of us. They'll actually be a leader. And the difference between our two approaches, we want absolute targets. They want targets per GDP so they can continue to grow. But I think there's room for negotiation.
Well, that's what I suggested. We got to bring people together to come to an agreement.
Yeah. But they're ahead of us on this issue.
I don't know that I agree with that last part, but I think we agree on the main point, which is that it has to be a coordinated effort. And there's got to be ways to find compromise so that they don't feel, or we don't feel, that anyone's economically unduly or disproportionately economically hurt by what we do.
Okay. As a point of information, the oil companies, in evaluating their projects, use an internal charge rate for the cost of CO2. And they put it into the project evaluation. They make their decisions based on including. That's the kind of market force we need to employ on these CO2 issues.
Interesting idea. Thank you. Yes, sir, right here. Why don't you take mine?
You stated that the mullahs, Vladimir Putin, and the terrorists ought not to go beyond a line that you would draw in the sand. The current administration is weakening our military, and sequestering is certainly a part of that. What do you intend to do to back up your line in the sand?
You're absolutely right. We're going from a 600-ship Navy down to 260 ships. We're going from an Air Force that right now, half of the fleet in the Air Force is the oldest and most antiquated that they've ever flown. We're down over 100,000 active duty soldiers in the Army. This is an enormous problem for our country. And, there was a bipartisan panel that got together last summer and put out a plan to reinvest in our military. I think there's a lot of very good ideas in there. And also what former Defense Secretary Gates has talked about in terms of reinvesting in the military and starting that in the next fiscal year. The president and sequester both have done enormous damage to our military during a really dangerous time, and we can't have it any longer. So that's why I'm trying to deal with the 71%, because we're going to need to use some of that money to reinvest in our military. There's nothing, and I would believe no greater duty of any president of the United States than protecting the security and the safety of the people of the United States. And there's nothing else. Everything else comes in second place. Everything else comes in second place. So that's part of the reason for wanting to change the way we're putting this money out and apportioning it through the budget, because we're starving our military right now in a way that makes absolutely no sense given the nature of the dangers we're facing in the world right now, which are much more than we faced in a very long time. And there's more chaos in more parts of the world, which would, necessitate us perhaps to be ready to be in a number of different places. And I fear right now that we're not. So that's what we would try to do. Ma'am?
Yes, as president, would you work to overturn Citizens United via a constitutional amendment?
I have to tell you that Citizens United, for those of you who don't know, is allowed certain monies to be given without limitation to political campaigns. Here's what I think about campaign finance. It never works. Campaign finance reform never works. Every time you set up a set of rules, then a group of clever lawyers get in the room and figure out how to get around those rules. And oftentimes, after we've had campaign finance reform, it's worse than it was before. And I'd suggest to you that right now, with the system that we have, where a lot of this money can be donated anonymously, where you don't have to reveal who the donors are or how much, you have even less transparency into seeing who's financing campaigns. Now, campaigns are enormously expensive things. I read a day or two ago in the paper that Hillary Clinton is saying that she's going to raise $2.5 billion to run for president. I mean, this is unthinkable sums of money. My inclination now is to say, listen, if the most important thing is to know who's financing each of these candidates' campaigns, and then for you to be able to evaluate, is that money influencing their policy positions in a way that you think is bad for your state or the country? Then the best way to do that is to let anybody donate whatever they want to donate to any candidate. But in 24 hours, that needs to be revealed on the internet, so that everybody can get on the internet, look at where you're getting your money from, see how much you're getting, because we're not stopping the money coming into politics. And it's like water. No matter how many times you plug it up, it finds a way. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think there's going to be any way to change that, absent going to a system where the public and taxes finance all political campaigns. I just don't believe that's a priority. When you talk about priorities and setting priorities for our people, I don't think financing political campaigns should be the priority. And I will tell you that we've worked in a public finance system in New Jersey where, and I've worked in it twice now, where you raise a certain amount of money and the government matches a certain amount of money. It doesn't mean that money doesn't get spent in other ways. And it's tax money that's used that might be able to be used on other things. And that's just on a state level. When you're talking about running a national campaign where there's billions of dollars being spent, not to mention the First Amendment concerns that some people would have about, hey, I should be able to express my opinion by supporting whatever candidate I want to support. So I really think we've now gotten to the point we've tried a bunch of different things. Maybe it's time to go to a system where people can donate whatever they want, but in 24 hours, you have to disclose that on the internet so everybody who's voting can see who gives what to who. and then what that does to you as a candidate and an office holder, and make your judgments that way. It's never going to be perfect, but I think that's the best you can come up with at the moment. Gentleman, right over here.
Governor, can you tell me how you would work with Congress to go ahead and accomplish things rather than subverting the Constitution?
Yeah.
And working through extreme executive orders?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, for those of you who don't know a lot about New Jersey, for the last 5.5 years as governor, I've worked with a Democrat-controlled legislature. 24-16 in the Senate, 48-32 in the lower house. So not even really close. And we've gotten a lot of things done. And the way you get things done is if you have people of goodwill on the other side, which I've been fortunate enough, for the most part, to have, and you work and spend the time to develop relationships with them. Let's face it, in government, we don't create anything. Right? We don't make anything. We don't manufacture anything. What we do is to try to help manage a civilized society. Well, if you're not being civilized to each other, how can you manage a civilized society? And the biggest concern about Washington now is people don't even set up these relationships anymore. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have an argument, publicly and privately, with the guys and women on the other side. I do. But it never prevents us from getting in a room and sitting and talking about things and resolving them. We've reformed teacher tenure in our state, Republicans and Democrats together. Passed significant pension and health benefit reform, Republicans and Democrats together. Capped property taxes, Republicans and Democrats together. We've dealt with a lot of contentious issues and difficult fiscal issues together. And what happens is we compromise. I mean, it's in politics today, compromise has become a dirty word. Well, you know, it can't be anymore. You know, fortunately or unfortunately for me, I've known Chuck Schumer for a long time because I'm from that neighborhood. And listen, I talk to Chuck Schumer frequently, and we worked a lot together during Hurricane Sandy and helped to get help for that entire region by working together. Sure you can. Listen, I say to my wife all the time that part of my job is not only to work with people I like, but to work with people I don't like. Right? That's my job. I don't get to choose. People elect who their representatives are, and they send them to the state capitol, and then it's my job to figure out how to make it work. And what I'd emphasize to you is it's the executive's job to make it happen. If you're waiting for a legislature or a Congress to lead, they're never going to do it. It's got to be the governor or the president who does that. And the problem with this president is not only doesn't he have any relationships with Republicans, he doesn't have relationships with many Democrats either. And you listen to those Democrats tell you that. I mean, right, and that's the point. Like I said the other day when I was in Londonderry that, you know, I've worked with the president, and at times we've worked okay together and other times not. But the fact is, if you always believe you're the smartest guy in the room, then you can shut off your ears all the time. I am relieved to tell you that I am infrequently the smartest guy in the room. But what I know how to do is make decisions. And that's not about necessarily being the smartest guy in the room. That's about being the guy who's unafraid to decide and chart a direction. It doesn't mean you're always going to be right. But you got to lead in a direction. And when you're doing that and you're not convinced you're the smartest guy in the room, your ears always remain open. They always remain open. I think that's the way you have to do it. Sir, right there.
First thing, a comment for you. I always get concerned when I hear people in your status refer to an insignificant amount of money. I wish you'd forward that to us. I got a pocket here, and I'll be happy to share it with everybody in here, and I suspect you'd put a real smile on their face. A couple questions on Social Security. Number one, it's been reported, picking on Johnny Carson, had 5 wives, 4 of which were married to him for more than 10 years. All 4 of them, plus Johnny Carson, is pulling on and did pull on his own Social Security. What would you do to shut down that side of it?
Get Johnny Carson to be a better husband. No, listen. There are a number of things that you have to do in the Social Security system to make it fairer. I've laid out the things that I think are the biggest and most major ones. But as I said in the speech at St. A's on Tuesday, this is not an answer to every question. And so you have to look and see what fairness leads you to be able to do in situations like that. I don't have an answer for Johnny Carson and his 5 wives off the top of my head. But I understand the concept you're talking about, which is an abuse of the system that it wasn't intended to be able to sustain. You got something else for me?
Just a comment on that, why don't we force the divorce issues right out to the attorneys initially? I happen to be a retired CPA. We've seen it way too often. We advise, and if you came in and said you're going to go through divorce, the first question is, how long have you been married? That's a wrong approach. It's what the rules are. Now, are you open on your Social Security proposals to new suggestions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen.
How much time do you want me to spend?
Not that much right now, but I'm going to be back here a lot, and I'm happy to take suggestions. Listen, as a leader, I think what your job is to start the conversation, and to start the conversation substantively. Like this gentleman raised, how do you get things done? Well, I've made a number of proposals in New Jersey on capping property taxes, on tenure reform, on pension and benefit reform that we ultimately accomplished, but were not my original proposals entirely. You start off giving ideas, and then you sit around the table with the other interested parties. What can you live with and what you can't you live with? What am I missing? What am I not seeing about this problem? What's the unintended consequence of some of my proposals that I never saw? I mean, that's the process of compromise that we need to go through that we're missing in our government right now. What we're missing in Washington is nobody's having those conversations. They're saying, this is what I want, and you say, this is what you want, and if one of us doesn't win, everybody loses. We close down the government. I mean, that was ridiculous when we did that in 2013. To close down the government is ridiculous. Towards no end, achieve nothing. And it is, if your job is to govern, when you close down the government, by definition, you failed. That's your only job. Your only job is to govern. I'm closing it down. Well, what the hell are you doing? Right? I mean, that's your job. Right? It's like you're a manufacturer of fill in the blank, and you can't come to an agreement with your supplier. And so you say, you know what? Hell with it. I'm closing down the factory. Well, who you hurting? So I would love to get more suggestions. I'm happy to get more suggestions. I got staff here. You can send me an email. Give me suggestions, because I got a feeling. Listen, I have a father who's a CPA, so I know you've got detail for me. And I'd love to hear that. And that's part of this. That's part of this process. Part of this process. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I'm supposed to end at 7 o'clock, so everybody can really start to drink even more, including me. So I have. Can I call the lady with the hat there for a second, and then I'll answer your question? But she raised her hand nicely and didn't yell out, so we like to do that. Oh, I answered the one you yelled out before. Go ahead.
So thanks for being here. I happen to work for the federal government, and I was there during the shutdown, and no disrespect to you and your party, but I believe it was the Republican Party that was taking the lead on that.
Oh, well, listen, I don't disagree. Listen.
No, I have a question to follow it.
All right,
so
go ahead.
I don't disagree with your statement that you want to get people to the table together, but everybody says that. And I haven't seen it happen.
Well,
and I'm a little bit younger
done it.
than a lot of people, but I haven't seen it happen at the federal level. So how would you get Congress to come to the table together when no one else has been able to do that?
Well, listen, I would say it's not that no one else has been able to do it, it's that no one else tried. I don't think this president has tried. And I will tell you this, President Bush got them to the table on a number of different things, some of which you might agree with and some of which you might not, but No Child Left Behind he did with Ted Kennedy, right? He compromised with them, and he didn't get everything that he wanted. President Bush did that with a number of different initiatives, especially in the early part of his administration. President Obama did not do this, even when he had a Democratic Congress. In the first 2 years of his presidency, he couldn't get an agreement on immigration reform with his own party. All I can tell you is the way I would do it is the same way I've done it in New Jersey, and that is that you develop relationships with people. These are human relationships. The fact that the president did not speak regularly with John Boehner when John Boehner was minority leader and Mitch McConnell was minority leader is wrong. Because you know what he found out? In one election, the minority leader can become the speaker. And then when you haven't spoken to that guy for 2 years, and all of a sudden he's a speaker and you go, hey, how you doing? Can we talk? He's going to be like, oh yeah? Where were you for the last 2 years? That's human nature, right? If you feel like you're being ignored, you're going to be a little edgier than you were otherwise. There's no guarantees in life, okay? So I'm not saying to you, take it to the bank, no matter what, I'd be able to make Congress work with me if I were to become president. But part of the way you can figure out whether something somebody promises might actually happen is to look at what they've done in the past. I haven't worked in a one-party state. Now, a lot of the folks who are thinking about running have worked in one-party states where they had the legislature their party, they were the same party, and it's a much easier relationship. For the last 5.5 years, I've had to work with the other side. There's not one thing I can pass from a budget to anything else if the Democrats in the legislature don't pass it. Because it's not even close, right? It's 24-16 and 48-32. It's not like I pick off a couple. I'd have to pick off 9 Democrats in the lower house and 5 in the upper house to get them to come my way if all the Republicans agreed with me, which, by the way, doesn't always happen, right? And you've seen that working for the federal government. So my point to you is that the only way you can do that is if you have a spirit of compromise and you're willing to work with people and be direct with them. You also need to tell them what you're unwilling to do. You do need to tell them, you know what? This is never going to happen. They've tried to raise taxes 5 times in my state. Every time they're about to do it, I look at the Senate President and Speaker and say to them, I'm not doing it. I'm going to veto it. They decide to pass it either for political reasons or because maybe they think maybe this time the old man won't remember and he'll just go ahead and sign this thing, right? So you got to set limits as well. The last thing, because I do want to comment on what you said first. I do think, that in the situation when the government closed, you had a lot of people in both parties who were playing chicken, right? It was a game. And the game gets executed on in a way that hurts everyday working people in this country when the government closes down. And I know that there were a bunch of Republicans who helped to cause that problem. And I spoke out about it at the time. It doesn't make any sense. What's the end game? What's the strategy to victory? That's what everybody should be looking at every day. How do we win for the people who sent us here? And that's not Pollyanna. I mean, that's our job. So I think the only way I can give you any assurance that if I were to run and win, that I would be able to do it is to look at what I've done before. And in New Jersey, it's not perfect. But man, let me tell you, I've had the Senate President in New Jersey say this entire range of things. One, that I'm his friend and that he really likes me. And then another day in the newspaper, he said, I want to punch him in the head. Right? You got to understand that that's the way human relationships work. And when the day he says on the front page of the paper, I'm going to punch him in the head, you can't then say, I'm not going to talk to him anymore. You say, okay, he had a bad day. He had a bad day. Maybe I had a bad day that made him have a bad day. We need to reignite that relationship again, and we have. It doesn't mean we agree on everything. Doesn't mean we'll fix every problem. But I have had experience in making it done, and the only thing that gets it done is spending the time. You need to spend the time on the relationships to do it. And if you don't have an open mind and open ears, it's not going to work. So that's a good point, because, all right. All right, I'll take one more. This lady looks like she really wants to ask me a question, so.
In your state and how it would translate on the federal level?
Well, education reform in our state, there have been some things that I'm very proud of, and there's some things that I'm less proud of. Let me talk to you about the things that I'm proud of first, and then I'll do the ones that I'm less proud of. The things that I'm proud of is that we've expanded charter schools extensively in our state, but we focused them predominantly in failing school districts. So that in school districts that are doing really well, we don't need to expand more choice necessarily in those districts because families have an option that's working for their kids. But in failing school districts, we need to provide those families with options. And so we've expanded charter schools in our failing districts, and I'm proud of that. We've gotten teacher tenure reform. And now, if a teacher has 2 years of a below average rating or 1 year of a failing rating, that teacher can lose their job even if they're tenured. Well, we should be accountable for what we do. And good teachers in my state, responsible teachers, haven't minded tenure reform at all because they're doing a good job every day. They're not worried about losing their jobs for those reasons. So I'm happy that we've done that on tenure reform. We've increased funding to education every year in our state. And we've dealt with our special needs population in a really aggressive way. Because New Jersey is the #1 rate of autism in the country. Our state has the #1 rate of autism. So we have a lot of special needs kids in our classrooms that need help. And we've worked with our Department of Human Services and our Department of Education to try to get more services, and we've successfully gotten more services to those kids to try to help them reach their greatest God-given potential, whatever that is. Stuff I'm not proud of, we have not been able to get broader school choice in those failing districts. I think in those failing districts, which are mostly urban districts, that those parents should be able to choose to send their child to a private or a parochial school with a voucher. And when the local school district shapes up and starts to provide a better education, then we can choose something. Democrats have been unwilling to do that. I've even wanted to do it on an even smaller scale of like something that's called the Urban Scholarship Act, and which would be funded by outside private sector folks, not even with government money. They haven't been willing to do that. Why? Because the teachers union doesn't like that. Right, same in the state. And the last part of what I'm not happy about is when we changed tenure reform, one of the things that I had to give up on in the spirit of compromise when I didn't get exactly what I wanted was something called last in, first out. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but last in, first out is if you have to reduce the number of teachers in your district, that quality of the teacher cannot be taken into account. Whoever was hired last is the first one who's fired. Seniority, pure seniority. I wanted to get rid of that because I really think people should be able to lose their jobs based upon the quality of what they're doing and not based on how long they've been there. And what it's really hurting is you have a lot of young people who have gone through Teach for America and other programs who are really enthusiastic about coming into the teaching profession. They're the newly hired folks, and they're the first ones getting bounced out. I fought hard to try to get last in, first out eliminated. I wound up giving up on it because they said if I tried to put it in the tenure reform bill, they would defeat the entire tenure reform bill. That's what I mean by compromise. I think that what I got done on tenure reform was good enough that I shouldn't kill the whole thing because I didn't get last in, first out. But I'm disappointed that we didn't get last in, first out. School superintendents should be able to make the decision if they're reducing their teaching force. Who are the teachers who are doing the best, performing the best in the classroom? Those stay. The ones who are not, those are the ones that go. And under our system in New Jersey, we can't do that. And I think that hurts our school districts. And you wind up having stuff like we have in New Jersey, and they have in a lot of urban areas, where you have teachers who are just being taken out of the classroom and sent to conference rooms to read the newspaper and do nothing all day because they're so bad in the classroom that we pay them not to teach. You want to talk about waste? We're paying them not to teach because we can't get rid of it. Total nonsense, and that's what we were trying to get rid of, but we couldn't. So I think there have been some areas of reform that have been good and some bad. As that applies to the national level, I'd say, listen, we have to put the future of the children first, and that means we can't be kowtowing to the teachers' unions and all those interested parties first. There should be more school choice in this country. There should be greater variety. There should be longer school day, and there should be longer school year. Listen, the agrarian calendar isn't what we're operating on anymore, right? I mean, I can tell you in New Jersey, there are very few kids who are leaving school in June to go out to till the fields, right? Not happening anymore. Yet everybody has the whole summer off, right? And we go to school 180 days a year. Especially in our difficult failing districts, those kids need more time in the classroom. We should be saying at the federal level, listen, if you're failing, you need to spend more time in school. These kids need to spend more time in school, not less, so we can help to get them up to speed. Because their future is just as valuable as my children's future or your children's future. Well, that's right. I mean, and we wonder why folks are passing us in the industrialized nations in achievement, math, and science. They're spending more time working. In the end, nothing replaces hard work. And so those are the kind of things I'd want to talk about on the federal level and get the federal government less involved in what's going on. Let communities run what they're doing. Let them make their decisions in their local communities. But get a lot of these rules out of the way so you can really decide what it is you want to do. Not what you want to do within the rules that we give you from the federal government. So that's the way I would deal with it. So, everybody. And since the guy who yelled at me in the back, even though I normally don't respond to him, I don't want to make you feel like I'm dodging it. In New Jersey, I opposed same-sex marriage. They sent a bill to my desk. I vetoed it. I believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman. It was fought to the New Jersey Supreme Court. The New Jersey Supreme Court decided that same-sex marriage was a constitutional right in New Jersey, and now I enforce that law because that's my obligation. As governor of New Jersey, I took an oath to enforce the Constitution of our state. I fought it to the Supreme Court. I lost. Once you lose, you can't say, hell, I don't like the ruling, so I'm not going to do it. you say, okay, I've got to comply with it. So, well, I'm talking about me, my man, not the other guys. So that's my position on same-sex marriage. I oppose it, but when it was placed in front of the Supreme Court and they decided otherwise, then it's my job as governor to enforce the law and the Constitution, and not my job just to, pick and choose like I'm in a cafeteria line, which laws I like and which ones I don't. I got to enforce the ones that are on the books and that were put there legally, and the court put it there. So that's my position on same-sex marriage, so you don't think I'm dodging it. All right, so a town hall at a pub worked out generally okay. I got worked out generally all right. Nobody walked out. Nobody threw a beer at me.
Bring it to Cinnaminson.
Bring it to Cinnaminson. That's a town in New Jersey, for those of you who don't know. Nobody threw a beer at me. Nobody started playing darts in the middle of it. No, there were no big problems. Listen, I will come back to New Hampshire, and we'll come back. We'll come back in exactly the same way I've come here this time. I will be myself. I will answer your questions. If I disagree with you, I'll tell you I disagree with you. If I agree with you, I'll agree with you. And you do the same to me. In the end, the reason I started doing these town hall meetings in New Jersey was because when you're governor, you can wind up being really isolated, right? I got the state troopers who take me around all the time. I never go in the front door of any place anymore. I always walk through the back door, through a kitchen, up a set of stairs, and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of a group of people. When I go to pick up my dry cleaning on Saturday, I got 3 troopers with me. I mean, this is not a normal life. And if you want to stay connected to the people that you're working for every day, you need to be in a situation like I was yesterday in New Jersey, where 400 New Jerseyans in southern Bergen County got to sit in a VFW hall, raise their hands for 2 hours, ask me questions, and get me to answer. And if I do run for president, that's exactly what I'll do as often as I can right here in New Hampshire, because there's no place, as you know, there's no place that takes it any more seriously, the picking of a president, than New Hampshire. So I really appreciate you coming tonight. Thanks to Shooters. Thanks to the family. I appreciate you for letting me come. Everybody have a great weekend. It's good to see you. Thank you very much.
Tell me how to live my life.